This is the first exam review video for Chapter 4. So one thing you want to be sure in Chapter 4 is that you're very clear on your forms of equations. So if you don't have these three maybe on your note sheet, you might want to pause the video and get those on there, maybe even getting the slope formula as well. My suggestion as you start the Chapter 4 exam review sheet is that you're really thinking about what the directions say. So in number 1, they very clearly want the equation in slope-intercept form. In any other problem, you want to pay attention to that so that you're giving the type of equation that's required. Sometimes you might start in point slope and switch it into slope-intercept. So in number 1, I think you're going to have an easy time getting A because they provide the slope and the y-intercept. So you want to think about, since they want it in y equals mx plus b form, you want to think about which value they provide as the slope and which is the y-intercept. In 1b, when they give you the graph, again, you want to be thinking about, can I identify from the graph the slope or rate of change and the y-intercept? So as you're looking, it's a little easier to tell the y-intercept on this one because they label it. So again, make sure that the y-intercept is being given as the b value. And then you want to count your slope. So as you count slope, you need that rise to run ratio. I can tell that the slope is positive, and I rose 2 for every 1 that I had in run, so either 2 over 1, or you could record your slope as 2, and then go ahead and write your equation. When you get to number 2, thinking slope-intercept form, you still want to be thinking about, do I have the ability to tell the slope and the y-intercept from the equation that they gave me so that I can make the graph? And so as I look in part A, I think I can because it looks to me as if this is in y equals mx plus b form. I'll be able to pull the slope and the y-intercept. In 2b, however, it's not. So we want to change that equation around and move it into slope-intercept form. We cannot just take the two numbers as they're written right now. They're not in the correct form to tell. So I would look to see that the y needs to be by itself. And at the moment, we're adding 3 x's to that, so because they're positive 3 x's. So I'm going to subtract a 3x on each side in order to get that alone. And so as I do that, make the problem a little bit bigger. My x's zero out, and I'm left with y equals. I want to put it in that slope-intercept form, so it's a negative 3x plus 2. From there, I can then identify that I've got a slope of negative 3 and a y-intercept of 2. I may want to write my slope as negative 3 over 1 to realize how that line will have to move when I graph it. And again, putting in my slope arrows to represent the rise to run before I go work on that graph. And the final thing I would say on the first video is, again, number 3 is talking about writing some things in slope-intercept form. And we don't want you to hesitate on word problems on the exam. So we want you to read this one through and see if we can identify one of 3 situations we found ourselves in with these word problems. They either gave us a point and a rate of change, 2 points, or a rate of change and a starting amount. So as I read through this, I want to read through and see if I notice anything that sounds like a rate of change. In the year 2001, full-length cassettes, that's how we stored our music back then, represented 3.4% of total music sales. I haven't heard a rate of change in there because I haven't heard a percent per year, percent per day, something per something that tells me I have a rate. It's more like they told me a starting amount in there. Between 2001 and 2006, the percent decreased by about 0.5% per year. Oh, wait a minute. I just heard a rate. 0.5% per year is a rate. And rates are our rate of change or our slope. Then they told me in 2001 that we started off that cassettes were 3.4% of music sales. So it sounds to me like that's a beginning value. So when they asked me to write an equation to find the percent of recorded music for any year between 2001 and 2006, I do know that starting in 2001 it began at 3.4% and changed or moved by 0.5% per year, and it decreased. So when I go to set up my equation, what I want to think about is that mx plus b form. They gave me a starting amount as 3.4%. And they said that it was decreasing by, so I want to make sure that my rate of change is negative, 0.5% per year. When you go to graph it on the grid at the right, we already have the starting amount. We're going to have to estimate about where 3.4% falls on that y-axis. When I decrease by 0.5, that's 0.5 over 1, so my slope, negative 0.5 over 1. So I want to go down half a box, but forward a full year. So as I go from 3.4, I'm going to have to go down to 2.9 and slide over a year. Again, now I'm at 2.9, I need to go down to 2.4 and slide over a year. So down and over, I'm going down 0.5% and forwards 1 year. And when I do that, things line up pretty nicely. So take a moment, get your graph in there really nicely. Then part C. Part C, they first want me to check the graph because it says find the percent of recorded music sold as cassettes in 2004 from the graph. Now the graph nowhere here says 2004, but the bottom says years since 2001. So year 0 was 2001. So 2004 since 2001 is 3 years since then. So I want to go up that line for 3 years and estimate what my cassette sales were at. It's falling above 1.5, but just below 2, so my estimate is 1.9%. Then confirm showing using the equation. So for the equation, I want to think about using an x value of 3, that same x I was using on the graph. So I'm going to go get my equation and carry that out. Negative 1.5 plus 3.4 is the percent I'm looking for. And sure enough, the percent comes out 1.9%. So be sure that you understand how to get that from the graph as well as how to get that from the equation.